Hey, welcome to Emerging Form. I'm Christy Ashwanden.
And I'm Rosemary Watola Tromer, and this is a show on creative process. Hi there, Christy.
Hey, Rosemary. I know that you were just in Albuquerque, which is where my parents live. My mom came to your event, and I heard that it was a little bit interesting, a little bit spicy. You wanna say more?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I had it was a first, Christy, for me. I had a very angry heckler in the audience, and he was in fact so angry. He was so angry he started shouting horrible obscenities at me and calling me evil and sick. And I guess just to tell the story just a little bit more fully, it was an outdoor beer garden, and there were, I don't know, maybe 150 people there. Not everybody there to listen to the poetry, but most of the people. And there were two, we could say there were kind of two kinds of people there. There were the kind of, you could tell who they were. They were the more kind of quiet, contemplative people who listened to my poems, in their meditation circles. And then there were the slam poets who were very big and rowdy. And so there were two very different kinds of audiences there. Well, I don't wanna go into this story for too long, but I'll just say this, that what ended up happening was that it was a pretty rowdy, fun, risque night with all of the things that were being presented, the poems. I was the last person to get up there, and I ended up doing one of the poems out of the unfolding, which is about women's pleasure and women pleasing themselves. It's entirely euphemistic. Let's just say that it includes phrases like diving into the deep end and rubbing the rosebud. So there's nothing explicit about this. It's just nothing that a kid would understand, and even adults, some might have to work at it, but there was a man who was very angry about this, and he jumped up and he was like, "You are sick." It was awful. Well, what happened, Christy, is the entire, like, audience just, like, literally rose up in their volume at first and just kind of made a lot of noise to drown him out. He wouldn't stop. And so then they literally put themselves in between me and this man and kind of helped him leave. And it was what sticks with me is a few things, but I guess the thing I'd like to focus on was just how protected I felt by the audience and how they literally rose up to protect me. And I realized something important. We've talked about this before, that vulnerability is my superpower. And there I was being exceptionally vulnerable, and then was protected, and then I really am stunned by how generous, even joyful the audience was in their protection of me, and made it possible for me to stay vulnerable. I mean, the show went on, and then we did some of my kinda kumbaya style singing about love and light and things that I'm known for. But it was pretty unsettling, honey, I'm the poet that makes people cry, not yell and scream, so it was it was really unsettling. Oh my gosh. Well, jumping from that into I'm so excited about our guest today. I've been a guest on his podcast, The One You Feed, a couple of times, and he has a new book. Eric Zimmer is an author, teacher, speaker, and the creator of The One You Feed podcast, an award-winning show with over 50 million downloads across 800 plus conversations exploring meaningful living. At 24, Eric was homeless, addicted to heroin, and facing prison, and his journey from those depths sparked his lifelong inquiry into human transformation and resilience. His story and his work have been featured in the media, including TEDx, Mind Body Green, Elephant Journal, the BBC, Brain Pickings, the New York Times, and his new book is How a Little Becomes a Lot: The Art of Small Changes for a More Meaningful Life. Let's bring him on. Hello, Eric. Welcome to Emerging Form.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, we're so delighted that you're here.
So I had a lot of fun reading your book, and I think it's always fun when you read a book and you have some other kind of context with someone, and you know them better from something else. Of course, I know you better from your podcast.
Mhm.
But let's start in on your book. For those who haven't read it yet, will you just describe the premise of how a little becomes a lot?
Yeah, the book's called How a Little Becomes a Lot: The Art of Small Changes for a More Meaningful Life. And the core underlying premise really is that change is a skill that we can all learn. Whether that be we want to make positive changes in our life or we're dealing with change that's given to us that we get that we don't really want, that we can get better at both those things, but we tend to think of it as a character flaw. Oh, I don't change because I'm lazy, because I'm the kind of person who X. I can't do that. I'm unable to do this. And I think it's really a matter of, for most people, we just haven't learned the skills. And those skills can be taught. And the book is my attempt to do that.
Mhm. And for you, um, why why do it in book format? Like, you're doing it to some extent already as a podcast, but what made you think, "Oh, this should be a book?"
I mean, this has been an ongoing process for a long time. I mean, a couple years into doing the podcast, I started getting approached by publishers, and I ventured into that a little bit, thinking about a proposal, but I don't think I had it yet. And so I finally hit a point where I was like, I think I have a perspective, a point of view, lots of valuable information to share. And I don't want it scattered across 800 podcast episodes. I don't want it only available to people that can afford to hire me for one-on-one coaching or people that can take the periodic programs I run. I want it to be affordable and available to everybody out there. So it just was kind of finally time to do it. And I honestly, I wanted the challenge of it.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I love that it sounds like you really wanted to share this thing that you had found, and this was really about, sharing it with the wider world rather than trying to benefit so much yourself. I'm really curious, in the book, you talk about the importance of various stages: pre-contemplation, contemplation, planning. It's interesting, it really, mirrors I've written in the past about, some scientific research on this. Prochaska was the guy's name, anyway, all
Mhm.
about these stages of change. And I
Yep.
just wonder, how did these show up in your own practice as you were writing this book?
Sure. So I'm quoting Prochaska and
Oh,
the
interesting,
stages of
okay.
change model. And
Uh-huh.
what I'm trying to sort of make the point of is, most of us, when we think about change, we just think about the behavior. We just jump in,
Yeah.
let's do the thing. But if you look at that model and lots of other models and my own experience, there's a lot of stuff to do before that
Yeah.
makes it far more likely we'll do it. So in that model, there's sort of a pre-contemplation, a contemplation, a planning, and then an action stage. So for me, pre-contemplation was just starting to think about a book at all,
Uh-huh.
right? The contemplation stage, I went in and out of a number of times where I contemplated. Like I said, a couple years in, I got an email from the managing editor at Harper One, which is like the premier publisher for the sort of book that I do.
Mhm.
And so I was like, well, I should probably look into that. So I worked on a couple things. I sent it to them. It didn't really work out. Again, I didn't have it yet.
Yeah.
And so I kind of then went back about my business, and then periodically I would contemplate. And then this last time, I really contemplated, and I went, okay, like, am I ready to do this? Do I have something to say? Do I have the space in my life to do it? And that led me then into sort of the planning stage and then the actual writing stage.
Mhm. I love what you just said about, "Do I have the time in my life to do this?" I think that's
Right.
such an important thing that so often sort of derails things where people have intentions, but they either haven't set aside the time in their life or they don't feel like they have it, and it really takes that commitment of putting aside that time, and so I like that you're mentioning that because it seems so essential to really getting a creative practice done, a creative work, or any kind of behavior change, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think for any of us that are trying to implement something new in our lives, most everybody is really busy,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which means if you're going to put something new in, something else has to come out.
Yeah.
And we talk in behavior science about these often being competing commitments.
Mhm.
right? I want to do a creative practice, but I also have a commitment to running in the morning. Okay, well,
Mhm.
I have competing commitments for that chunk of time.
Yeah.
I've got to figure that out. I've got to figure out which one is most important, or I need to get creative. And for me, I mean, books have been my best friend since I was like 5.
Oh.
And so to write a book for me felt really like I don't want to do it if I can't do it really, really well.
Mhm.
I mean, I knew I could write a book, but writing a really good book, I just knew I had to have enough time that I could dedicate to. Now, my guitar is a totally different animal, right? Like I play
Interesting.
guitar every day and
Mhm.
I might play for 5, 10, 15 minutes a day. That's all I've really got for it.
Mhm.
But I'm not aiming at one particular target with that so much as I'm enjoying it for the creative
Mhm.
process of it. And so again, I think when we get into creativity, there's so many factors about like, well, why are we doing it? What are we aiming at?
Mhm.
What's the point? What does success feel like?
Yeah,
And
I
some
love
of
that
that,
you're asking that. That's such a good question, and I'm kind of curious, with the guitar playing, is that something that's kind of more of an impulse, like you play when you feel like it and you most days you feel like it, or is it something that you specifically are also setting time aside for?
it's somewhere in between those two.
Mhm.
The time that it tends to happen is either before dinner or before bed.
Mhm.
And I have a vague intention to play
Yeah.
every day, but if I don't make a big deal out of it.
Right.
Mhm.
So it's not completely like I'll only pick it up if I feel like it. And some of it just becomes, and I don't want to say habit because habit's a weird word and we use it in all sorts of ways it shouldn't use. I don't have a habit of playing guitar in the evening before bed, but I have a tendency towards it. I have some
Mhm.
momentum in doing it. My brain thinks most nights about when I'm going to bed, it thinks, oh, my partner Ginny's going to go in and she's going to do a bunch of stuff to get ready to go to bed. And I can take this 15 minutes and I can play guitar. But I have no goal with guitar. I used
Mhm.
to. I used to write songs, I used to be in bands, I mean, but now for me, it's just I just wanna play it. Like,
Just play. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just like playing. It's a comfort
Mhm.
to me. It's it's a creative practice that brings its own benefit to me. And again, that's I think when we start to talk about creative practice, like and I don't is the goal to get to create something that does something in the world? Is the goal to do it just for the process? And I think for most of us, it's always both to a certain
Mhm.
degree.
But it's interesting what you're saying. It sounds as though, this has evolved for you a little bit. There was a time when guitar playing and music was really your thing, and that's what you were doing. Now you've been writing, you're doing other things, and so you're still retaining that creative practice, but now it's really sort of almost down to its essence of the thing itself and doing it rather than having some sort of goal-oriented outcome.
I had to really relearn that. That was really hard for me. When I finally
Mm.
made the decision, like, okay, I don't have space in my life right now to pursue music in a serious way.
Mhm.
And I just didn't. I had to make some choices. And one of the big ones was I started this podcast and I loved it. I was like, okay, and I was traveling for work, so I just really couldn't be in a band. I was always feeling bad about not being in a band. I was always feeling pressure to write songs, and I really had to unlearn all of that. And I started by just sort of getting back to like, listen to what an E chord sounds like.
Mhm.
Like you strum that, and it's a beautiful sound. I mean, first,
Uh-huh.
I remember the first time I could play one right, I was like, oh, look at that. And so I kind of just had to, for me, I had to go back to the very basics. And every time my brain started to go, oh, you could, and I try and set it aside. Um,
Yeah.
and so I don't really, even when I write, and I mostly just, I spend a little time learning stuff, but I mostly just pick up and play. And I'll create something that I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. And
Uh,
I generally won't do it. I generally won't do anything with it. I don't have a real solid plan for recording them and going back. I'm like, well, if I keep playing it, then it's good enough to stick around, uh,
yeah.
and so I'm almost radically in the other direction. Like I just don't want anything to mess with the joy of it. The doing it for itself. I don't want to taint is the wrong word. I don't want to mix up motivations in there. And
Yeah.
I'm able to do that because guitar just is a thing.
So I wanna go back to your book, and some of the choices that you had to make to to make the time for it. And
Mhm.
would you talk us through what did that look like? Like, what did you end up giving up to make the time to write a book? And what was that choice-making process like?
Yeah, I mean, some of it was that when I started doing I've been doing the podcast 12 years, and I've been doing it full time for about 6 years. So the podcast and doing some speaking and some coaching and all of that. And I worked really hard to design a business that could run stretches of time without me.
Mhm.
That meant obviously I made less money because I was hiring people to help me with things. Like there were
Yeah.
conscious choices all through here for sort of lifestyle design. I wanted to build a business that served my life, not the other way around.
Mhm.
And I was fortunate enough to be able to get there. So I was able to say like, okay, I can step away from these various things. A lot of it, honestly, in my case, was when I really paid attention to what I was doing in some of those chunks of work time. I couldn't really say what value they were. I'm
Mhm.
poking around.
Right.
It wasn't focused. And so I
Yeah.
just said, okay,
Sounds like
here
writing a book.
Yeah.
exactly. Here are the windows that I'm going to be writing in, and I set them aside and I blocked them on the calendar, and then I thought about, okay, well, what's all the other stuff that has to happen? All right, well, if I do this way, I can fit all of that in right there. And if I stop checking email every hour, I could just do email once at the end of the day. I mean, things like that, where I tried to do time management to free up those spaces. And in
Mhm.
the end, for me, well, what I gave up was coaching revenue. Right? I mean, I essentially gave up revenue from coaching, which is I get paid for the hours that I show up to coach someone.
Yeah.
And so I did way less of that. And again, that was an income, it was an income decision.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough that I can make that choice and still make a living.
Mhm.
Um, although it teeters on the edge a lot of
All
times,
right.
but I've been able to make that choice and want to make that choice. So I think some of it was that also. I mean, there are real sacrifices. I mean, back to that point of if we're going to start spending time doing something else, we're going to not do something else that we've been doing. We might find that that thing that we're not doing isn't actually that valuable, and you go, okay, I just have to
Mm.
replace it. But you might find it is valuable. Earning money is a valuable activity,
Yeah.
but it's not the most valuable activity to me.
Did you have any writing experience before you wrote this book?
No. Well, I was in not corporate America. I was in startups for a long time. Then I was in corporate America. So I wrote a lot as in email and communications, but that's a
Mhm.
Yeah, not the
Totally
same
different.
thing.
right? Not totally different animal. So no, not really. Um, I knew I was a competent writer. I
Mhm.
was not in any way, shape, or form a good writer in the beginning. I mean, that was just I could be objectively true about that. The stuff I started writing, I was like, that is not very right. But it's fine. I mean, what I would say is it's fine,
Mhm.
right? But I didn't want to write a fine book, a book that would get a C plus, right? And so, but no, I did not. So there was a huge learning curve for me.
Tell us a little bit about it. I'd love to hear, like, what did that look like, that learning curve?
Well, so there's a couple different things. You sent over some questions ahead of time about trust, right? And trust in the creative process. And this is where a lot of trust had to come in. I had to trust that if I kept writing and sticking with it, that it would get better.
Mhm.
And luckily, I mean, all I've basically done is interview authors of all different stripes for 12 years. We're not usually talking about the process of authoring. That's not what I do. I'm talking about the content of their books or their poems or
Yeah.
their worldview, right? Rosemary, you've been on a couple times. And so, what I know from having the benefit of talking to all those people is every person I've talked to will express doubts at some point, like, I don't think I can do this. What I'm doing isn't any good. I'll be like, "You've written like 5 New York Times bestsellers. Like, what are you talking about?"
Uh-huh.
And they'd say, "I don't know if I can do it this time."
Uh-huh.
And so
Yeah.
I knew that was part of it. That was really helpful. The So the trust was if I keep at it. The other trust that I often have is that I need other people to help me, and I can trust in that. So when I got sober, right, I went to 12-step meetings, and I had to trust that that group could help me in a way that I couldn't help myself.
Mhm.
And I became really interested in the acknowledgments of books
Mhm.
over the last, 6 years. And as I looked at them, I was like, "My God, like there's a this is not a human who walked off into an office, produced a masterpiece, came back out and handed it to the publisher.
Right,
There's a
yeah.
lot of people in that process."
Mhm.
And so for me, I was fortunate enough, I got a decent advance. And so one of the things I did right away was I hired sort of a developmental editor to work with me kind of from the beginning. Because I just knew I needed it, because writing is a craft, and I think any craft you get better at by doing it. And I was like, "There's no
Absolutely.
way I'm in this 1-year period I have to write this book, gonna scale the writing tower,
Yeah.
but if I can get people to help me who have scaled the writing
Mhm.
tower to some degree, that's gonna be beneficial." And so I just asked for help a lot. And that is, again, I
Yeah.
trusted in that if I ask for help and I keep putting in the work, I will get to a place that is at least good enough that I can say, "Okay, I did my best here." And that was really what the trust process was, and that was what the learning process was. When I started, I didn't know what I was doing. And I could write something basic, but then I would work with my editor, and what would happen is I would write something and she would send a bunch of stuff back and I would work on it and she would send a bunch of stuff back and I would work on it. And I'm like, "Oh, we just got the introduction done. And you know what? It's really good."
Mhm.
I was like, "Wow, how'd that happen?" Right? That was the and I was
And
learning
that's
what
how
she was
trust builds.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I was learning what she was doing a little bit, right?
Mhm.
And so chapter 1 was a little bit easier. Chapter 2 nearly broke me. But by the end of the book, I felt like, okay, I have a sense of what I'm doing here. I have a sense of the things I know the things I want. It became clearer.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, an editor was still a really important part of the process for me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
I
to see things I just couldn't see.
Yeah, I love that you were open to learning and open to sort of sharing the process and realizing, I think asking for help and looking for help can be really hard for some people.
Mhm.
And the fact that you were able to do that and not only to do it, but to be open and to be learning, it sounds like as you wrote and got that feedback, it made you better. And so you probably needed less help in the later chapters or as you were going, right?
Right, and again, I think most thing in life we wanna get better at, that is the process, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have to do something, and then we have to get some sort of feedback on it, and then we have to try it again. I mean, it's an iterative process, and it tends to work better with other people involved in that process.
Mhm. I wanna go back to something you said a moment ago that chapter 2 almost broke you. Can you talk a little bit about that? What
Let's hear about
happened?
chapter 2.
Yeah.
So chapter 2 was, I thought, a straightforward chapter about motivation. Now, again, this is only my 2nd chapter. And chapter 1 was I kinda had in the bag already. I mean, I had a lot of things. It was a piece of advice I got at a certain point in the book that if I'd had it before chapter 2 would have served me very well. But the piece of advice was, at least in my case, he said, "Spend what's in your pocket." And that was
Oh.
really valuable,
Oh.
because what I was doing was I kept thinking I had to put more stuff into my pocket.
Mhm.
And it's not that maybe in cases I didn't, but if I didn't spend what was in my pocket first, I didn't know, "Oh, I need another anecdote here. I need
Yeah.
another study here. I need
Mhm.
another, something clever." You know what I mean? I didn't
Yeah.
and that was the thing that really stopped me from approaching every chapter as, "I have to go research this whole thing."
Mhm.
Because I had taught this stuff in a course for years. I mean, I
Mhm.
had the basic material. I just didn't trust it.
Oh, interesting.
So anyway, if I'd had "Spend What Was in Your Pocket," chapter 2 might have been better, but it also was one where when I started diving into it, I went, "Oh, well, what I've been teaching about this is very simplistic compared to what this thing actually is." That's the other thing writing does, at least for me, is it's like it helps me realize like, oh, you've been saying that, and you're not that clear. And writing forces you to encounter the flaws in your logic or the
Yeah.
ways in which oh, I said that here, but then I'm saying this, it's not consistent. And so I started just getting into like what is going on inside us. And you're like, well, we've got values and we've got needs and we've got
Yeah.
desires and so now I'm getting into the research. This is not a joke, I wrote 55,000 words on that chapter before I finally got
Wow.
my contract
Yeah,
was
just
for
for
like 60,000 words.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I just spun and spun and spun.
Yeah.
And and again, I think it was a combination of it was the most difficult chapter. Looking back,
Mhm.
I mean, just material wise.
Yeah.
So it was definitely that, and I didn't know what I was doing yet, right?
Mhm.
I combined those two things,
Yeah.
and that really, really bogged me down. Um,
But it
And
also
what
taught you something, right? I mean, wasn't it a learning experience?
Absolutely. Right?
Yeah.
Because what ended up happening at the end of it was I made some real simplifications that I probably could have made earlier if I was willing to accept that that's what it needed to be.
uh
Mhm.
But, one of the things when you're writing a book like mine, which is we'll call it self-help. I don't love that word, but a self-help book, you're quoting studies. I'm quoting studies. I'm quoting researchers who've been on my podcast. I'm pulling in lots of ancient wisdom tradition stuff. But part of what's happening as I'm writing that is my brain is saying, well, what's the argument going to be against that?
Mhm.
And another friend of mine, a writer, told me that he approaches his work in phases. You know, and he called that phase defensibility.
Oh.
And it
Mhm.
was the very last phase after
Mhm.
everything else was done. And I was starting from there.
Right.
Like
Interesting, yeah.
everything was like, is that defensible? I don't know. I got to go research that. And this person says this. And you get into any kind of science really, and you realize nobody agrees on things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some, maybe generally astronomers believe that the Big Bang started it, but you start diving a level or two deeper and you're like, well, there's all kinds of different nuances in this. And that's what I was
Mhm.
finding, that there's a great deal of nuance in there's so many theories about what motivates us and what's going on
Yeah.
in our brain. And so that that yeah, that process was definitely a learning experience for me.
Okay, so I wanna just recap, you were bogged down in 55,000 words of chapter 2. For people, an entire book is often, 80 or less.
80,000, yeah.
Yep.
So and one thing that happened was you simplified. Now in retrospect, that if you had just spent what was in your pocket first, that would have helped. But
Mhm.
what was it how did you get to that simplification? Like, what was that process of, "I've got 55,000 words," you're totally bogged down, and how do you end up with what you have now as chapter 2?
I don't know exactly. I feel like at a certain point, my editor and I had a conversation, and I just decided like I almost need to start over.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Like I need to I can't just I've got all these words that I'm trying to, pull together, and I just kind of had to step back and go, hang on. Okay. What am I really trying to say here? What's the
Yeah.
point of this entire chapter? How does it tie to everything else I'm doing? And what is actually useful to the reader in this case?
Oh, okay.
I have a tendency to want to overwhelm with information. One of my superpowers is I see the nuance in everything. That is
Mhm.
also sometimes my greatest weakness because
Isn't
I
that
want
how
to
that goes?
caveat the living heck out of everything that I say. Well, it's this, except in which case if you're
Yeah.
that, and then, but of course, some people think this, and maybe if you do, right? And it ends up being nothing. It's like I'm saying nothing at the end of the day. And so I realized I have to take a stance here. I have to simplify this. And so I think I kind of needed to really step away and um, do it. I think in retrospect, what I might have done would be to have walked away from that chapter for a while.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I might have said, move on. I might have, in retrospect, one of the things I might have done was jump ahead to a chapter I thought would be easy because I was
Mhm.
so early in the process.
Yeah.
I was so early in the process. And I don't know if I think the later chapters were easier because they were easier. Like I had a very clear, I knew what was in my pocket. I knew how to
Yeah.
spend it, and I had gotten better.
Mhm.
And so, that was a learning experience for me. I think I had to go through it. That did not happen to me again because I did learn my lesson a little bit. Like, okay, hang on, this is not
Yeah.
a good approach. And I think if
Yeah.
you're writing any sort of nonfiction, but I suppose it's the same for fiction or anything, you can get really caught up in research of all different kinds.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is valuable. And knowing when you're taking that too far is a real sort of like it's hard to do. And some people write books where they don't have the answer in their pocket, right? I'm thinking of investigative journalist type stuff, even people who do that in the self-help world. So they do have to do research as they're going, right?
Mhm.
Um, those people also tend to know what they're doing, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Right? I mean, seriously, they
Yeah.
seem to know. And now I do in
Yeah.
a way. I'm not saying like, oh, I'm a great writer, and if you sat me
Yeah.
down today, I would write a great book. I still would need help for sure, but I'm
But I
certainly
love what
way
you're
better than I was.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying here about you sort of learned as you went along, and you learned how to write a book by writing a book, and you did it. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
great. Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. And for listeners who are paid subscribers to Emerging Form, we're going to continue this conversation. We'll have a special bonus episode next week. You can become a paid subscriber and access that episode at emergingform.substack.com. Eric, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, and I encourage anybody listening to become a subscriber because supporting the creatives that you care about is really important. So
Oh,
there's
thank
my
you.
little plug for you, and you guys
Thank
are
you,
really
Eric.
great. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. If you like our show, visit us at emergingform.substack.com, where you can find more, including show notes and back episodes.
There, you can also sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter or become a paid subscriber, which gets you bonus episodes every other week.
That's emergingform.substack.com.
You've been listening to Emerging Form. This is Rosemary Watola-Tromer, and my co-host is science writer Christy Ashwanden. Our fabulous audio producer is Cherie Turner, and our music is created and performed by Kira Kopostansky and edited by Leah Shaw. Kate LaRue designed our logo, and Jack Mueller, of course, inspired our work and the name of this podcast. As he always said, you must obey the poem's emerging form. Until next time.